Welcome to this week's edition of Black Authors Matter TV, where we interview the latest movers and shakers in the African American literary community. You'll meet some old friends, discover new ones, and stay abreast of the latest book developments around the country and even the world. So sit back and relax for the next 2 hours with Black Authors Matter TV co-hosts Gwen Richardson and Dr. Rhonda Lawson.
Good evening. It's July 12th, and you have reached Black Authors Matter TV, and you have reached another amazing show for tonight. I am Gwen Richardson, your host for tonight, along with my co-host,
Dr. Rhonda Lawson. Good evening, everyone.
And we always have an amazing lineup every week, and this week is no different. And I know I say that every week, but every week is true. So,
you can't help it.
It's true. So before we get started with our show and bring on our first guest, a couple of announcements we have. First, our next book club kickback is September 13th. And our guest author for the kickback with the book clubs is Brandon Massey. He has a brand new book out called The Exes, E-X-E-S. And Rhonda is going to post a link that'll show you the cover because it's like a couple and there's a line between them. So they're exes, but some kind of drama is going on with them. So he's going to be on the show with us on September 13th. And so if you're in a book club and you normally participate, we'll be sending out the emails this week for you to sign up to join us on September 13th. And then on our August 16th show, that's when we will announce the finalists for the Jerry Pinkney Children's Book Award. So that will be the second half of that show. And on July 26th, which is 2 weeks from today, we will celebrate our second anniversary. It'll be our second anniversary show. And that's just amazing. This show has been around for 2 whole years, every single week. We're excited about that. So we are going to bring on our first guest, and then we're going to do our book giveaway after this first guest comes on. So our first guest is, we have 2 books to give away tonight, but our first guest is Candacy Taylor, and she is an author, historian, and curator. Her book is called Overground Railroad, and the subhead is The Green Book and the Roots of Black Travel. So she's going to tell us about, I think Overground Railroad is catchy. And, you know, it's always good to have a catchy title for your book. And it's kind of like a play on the Underground Railroad. But her book is called The Overground Railroad, and she's going to tell us what it's all about. Welcome to Black Authors Matter TV, Candacy Taylor.
Hi, thank you for having me.
You are very welcome. So, do you have a copy of your book with you?
Actually, I don't. I'm on the road.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I'm documenting sundown towns all throughout the country. So
Oh, wow.
I left New York. My God, I've driven over 10,000 miles since early June.
Well, how has that trip been? That seems like it's very eye-opening.
I'm sorry, it seems what?
I said that seems like it's very eye-opening. How has that trip been? How's the research been on that?
It's been fascinating, you know, because so much is really going on in the country right now. And I'm always trying to get a sense of the pulse of, you know, really what's happening. And the only way to do that is to get off the highways and take the back roads. Mm-hmm. So it's been, you know, a lot of people assume that the sundown towns were mostly a Southern thing, but really they weren't. The South had the fewest sundown towns. So it's the North and the Midwest that actually has the most. So I'm in Illinois right now, and there's over 400 sundown towns.
You know,
now explain what that is for the
oh, sure, yeah.
people who may not know what that means.
Good call, thank you. Sundown towns were all white communities, and they were all white on purpose. And they banned Black people after dark. After 6 p.m. usually, they'd either have a sign at the county line saying N-word, don't let the sun set on you here, or they would ring a bell at 6 o'clock, telling the locals or people who were domestics or who were working in the homes that they had to leave. So this was a huge practice that was pretty pervasive. There's a book called Sundown Towns by James Lowen, who passed. And so I've been interviewed a lot about sundown towns because I used to tell people to just talk to Jim. So now they're talking to me, and I just really wanted to get a sense of, most people assume that these places are still really inherently dangerous or racist. And, in most cases, a lot of these places have moved on, but there's still a lot of them that are still overwhelmingly white. And those that are, that have a brown and black population tend to be, you could say maybe 90% of those on the census are actually in their private prisons. So they're counted as residents, but they're really not. So it's kind of a prison gerrymandering. And of course, you get more legislative power in Washington, the more people you have in your community. So you find major cities like Philadelphia that will have a large black population, but most of them are imprisoned in parts of Eastern Philadelphia that were primarily white communities. So
fascinating. I mean, and what's also fascinating is that even in this day and age, even if the town has moved on, people of color are still afraid to go into those areas because of that inherent racism. I'll never forget, this was actually back in the 90s, but I was stationed at Fort Knox, Kentucky, and I would drive home to Louisiana. And there were certain towns that I would never stop in for gas, even though I never heard of anything happening there. It was just the history of those towns. And then there was one time, it was nighttime, and I had to stop for gas. I knew exactly what cities I would stop in, but for some reason my timing was off, and I had to stop in this small town, and I was so afraid. I pumped the gas, and then I hurried and ran into my car, and then my chest was palpitating because I was just because of the inherent history of those towns.
trauma.
Yeah. And then even in this day and age, it's still out there. Even in New Orleans, Louisiana, there was a sheriff there. He's been dead for years, but everybody in New Orleans knows not to go in a certain area because that's called Harry Lee territory.
Yeah, you don't know if the ghost is haunting the place, or it is intense.
Right.
Even when I'm in these places, I went to one town, I'm found out very quickly. I noticed that people notice me almost immediately, and I don't get out of my car and wander around and talk to people. I'm in my car and trying to be stealthy, but I'm found out like that within 5 minutes. And one town, there was 3 police officers within, I'd been there maybe 10 minutes. I don't know if it was the same police officer. I don't know if it was 3 different ones, but I was like, it's time to go. You just have to use your instincts, and that's how we've survived.
I was just going to recognize you. Do they want to talk to you, or are they kind of just avoiding you? What is that feeling that you get when you realize that the people recognize you?
Oh, I feel like it's time to go. I was taking a photo of a marquee that had the sign of the town on it, and I was trying to, I don't bring my big camera out like I did for Overground Railroad. These are just, my little cell phone. And the woman who was working in the theater saw me, and then she picked up the phone, and I didn't know who she was calling. She could be calling the cavalry. I didn't know. So I was like, that's my cue. I don't want to find out. Like you said, maybe it was nothing, but because of the reality and the fear of, their history, I'm not going to wait to find out. So
one of the most unsettling feelings on a road trip is when you have to take an exit that's not in a major area. When I try to get an exit to get gas, I try to do it where it's like a town, where you can see buildings, you can see stuff. But there's been a couple of occasions where you go too long, and then the exit is one exit, and there's nothing So, and the gas station isn't even right off of the interstate.
I
You
hate,
have to get off and go down the road away.
and they don't even have like a real, it's not a chain. It's
Right,
like all those mom and
right.
pops and
Right. And it's so
on
I
the
try
whole-
to I just keep topping off, when we stop.
Mhm.
After a couple of instances like that where nothing happened, but people other than people staring, at
Yeah.
you at your every move till you get in your car and leave. So now the Sundown Towns, because we do want to talk about the Overground Railroad book. Are you doing it for a book? Is this your next book project, the Sundown
No,
Towns?
and not necessarily. I mean, I guess it could be, but I really, I did write about sundown towns and Overground Railroad. And so it's an extension of that, but really I wanted to get a better sense of what's happening in terms of, all of these, whether there's communities where books are being banned or where there's this CRT, backlash. Although we know that critical race theory is not being taught in elementary schools because that's taught in law school or advanced college courses, but there's this hysteria about it. So, and I wondered, all of the rhetoric around replacement theory, people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, she was raised in a sundown town.
Right.
Bill O'Reilly was raised in a sundown town. It's like how many of these people who are seem to be really fearful about Black history, maybe because they never saw or knew a Black person growing up, because the segregation that is it's already, all of our major cities are already so segregated. I live in New York City. A lot of the cities I write about in Overground Railroad, a lot of the migration destination cities, Detroit, Cleveland, Baltimore, Los Angeles, segregation hurts everybody because we're just so fearful of what we don't know. And so, yeah, I thought, I just wanted to find out how the country was doing in that regard. And if a lot of the signs that I saw, Harrison, Arkansas is pretty much one of the few, I would say, places that still has severe, intense roots of racism. When I was there, there's 4 headquarters of major white nationalist groups there. Vidor, Texas is another one. There are a few that are still
no, not to stop in Vidor. Vidor is off of I-10. So if you're leaving Houston and going east from where we are, you just Interstate 10 takes you through past Vidor, and everybody knows not to stop there. And you also I don't know if the sundown towns and what they call the speed trap towns are one and the same, but a lot of those small towns too, you have to slow down and go the speed limit because their whole budget is based on people traveling and going too fast, and they stop and get a ticket. So that's one of those.
It sounds like this is closely related to the Overground Railroad. The work that you're doing with the sundown towns, it can be pretty connected with Overground Railroad.
Oh, it's an extension of the work I'm doing. Yeah, I just don't know if it'll actually become a book or anything like that. I have an exhibition that's traveling throughout the United States with the Smithsonian. And so I'm giving talks. It just opened in Mississippi at the Mississippi Museum in Jackson, Mississippi. So I'll be giving a talk there in August. So while I'm on the road, I'm also doing a lot of speaking engagements. I just did a talk in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and at a big festival. And I'll be accepting in the award. I'll be at the Automotive Hall of Fame award ceremony because Victor and Alma Green, who wrote the Green Book, which is what Overground Railroad is about, they are being inducted into the Automotive Hall of Fame. And since they're gone, I'm accepting the award on their behalf. So that's that's next week.
That's fascinating.
So I'm also doing that on the road too. I'm not just doing sundown towns.
So tell us what we can find if we read the Overground Railroad. It's about the Green Book and the roots of Black travel. So where does it start in terms of generally the year, the period, the era, and where does it take us through? And just tell us about, and tell us how you came up with the name Overground Railroad.
Okay. Well, Overground Railroad is a book about, really, it's not just about the Green Book. Now, the Green Book was a travel guide that was published for Black people during the Jim Crow era, and that started in 1936 to 1966. So the book covers that time frame, but it also moves us up until today, and it's a decade by decade exploration about how that pendulum of justice would swing forward and back. You know, this idea that in 2016, when Trump was elected, I remember so many of my friends, or when Charlottesville happened, you know, so many of my well-meaning white liberal friends would call me in tears saying, how can this be? It's 2016, you know, as though we just kept getting better as a society in regards to race. And that's just never been our history. You know, we'll take steps forward and then we'll go back. So the book really looks at those moments when things really, you know, felt like they were getting better, and then we had a backlash. But it also, the book also is written in the eyes of my stepfather, who is Ron Burford. And I opened the book with him because he's my kind of guardian angel. Throughout the book, there's a narrative arc of his stories, and he, you know, I lost him. He died the week I started writing Overground Railroad. And when I was on the road doing a lot of this field research, I talked to him all the time on the phone because I travel alone. And he would just tell me all these stories about growing up in the Jim Crow South as a dark-skinned Black man. And he had never told me the stories, and I'd known him pretty much all my life. And I felt like it was such an honor to get those stories, and then to lose him was so devastating to me. But he becomes a narrative arc and kind of humanizes this history in a way. So you get to meet Ron. And I came up with the title by accident. I got a fellowship with Henry Louis Gates Jr. at Harvard. And I was there doing the scholarly research, and I was in the Harvard yard with my fellows, which was a surreal experience, just even being there. And I was saying, you know, it was like an overground railroad, because there were so many of these Black businesses. It was all about being present and being out in the world in a way that we had been denied, you know, instead of being in the Underground Railroad, where of course everything was very hidden and very secretive and very, you know, this was like, no, we can do this too. We can take vacation like white folks, like anybody else. Yes. And so that was the idea. So it was like an overground railroad. And my friend and colleague, John Jennings, who's done incredible work, you may know of his books, but he said, that's the title of your book. And I said, you might be right. Called my agent, and then that was the title.
Wow, you know, it's interesting as you're talking, and I'm picturing those times, and I'm quite sure you've heard many people say that desegregation actually killed a lot of that overground railroad. And not that desegregation was a bad thing in and of itself, but as soon as this happened, people all of a sudden left their communities, because now all of a sudden their communities weren't good enough. So let me go see what the white folks have going on, because their ice is a little colder than ours. And you know, and even in this day and age, we still experience some of that, where we don't feel that what's in our community is good enough, and we have to kind of go over to the other community. Yeah. So I'm wondering, as you did your research, did you see any evidence of that?
Absolutely. You know, I dedicated a chapter called, it's chapter 11, and it's, oh my gosh, integration was a double-edged sword, the double-edged sword of integration. Sorry, it's been a while since I read the book. But that, and Ron, my stepfather, said, I mean, he flat out said, he said, desegregation was the worst thing that happened to us as Black folks. And it's not that he wanted us to remain segregated. It's just that the fallout from that was so severe, and places like the Dewdrop, say for instance in New Orleans, was, of course, Black folks couldn't go to the French Quarter. So we went to the Dewdrop, and it was so popular and so fabulous. I mean, white people went to the Dewdrop, and during a time when integration was illegal. And so the Dewdrop kept getting shut down or just at least raided because white folks were in the Dewdrop and Black and whites weren't supposed to mix.
Right.
So it was a real, incredible change when, of course, the laws changed and then Black folks could go to the French Quarter. And they thought, well, like you said, we want to see what's going on over there. And so then they abandoned the Dewdrop. And it just completely, a lot of these places in the 60s and 70s just, they were abandoned and they just fell by the wayside in a lot of the communities, because once housing was more integrated, a lot of Black folks with means who lived in these segregated communities left. And so there were these hyper, segregated areas of poverty, because in the Black, community, the only folks that were left, large percentage, didn't have the money to leave. And so it really shaped, and it changed the way that our communities operated. And I have to say, I mean, the thing about the Green Book is that, I've cataloged over 10,000 Green Books businesses.
Wow.
And the majority of them were Black. And that's pretty incredible when you think about Black entrepreneurship and what, it's hard to do, it's apples and oranges comparing how many Black businesses there were then versus today. But largely, you can say, it's pretty definitive that we did not have the same number and breadth of impact of our own businesses today that we did then. So it's very, it's a challenging conundrum, this idea of trying to be integrated and be, it's hurt us more than helped us in some cases.
It really hurt us in terms of K through, well, there wasn't really a K in most Southern towns or cities, but K through 12 education, it hurt us in that regard, because just the level of professionalism of the teachers that were teaching before the forced busing integration, the Black teachers were outstanding. I mean, they were committed, they were on a mission, they knew they were building leaders of the future, they took it seriously, they had the highest respect from the community, they had total control of their classrooms.
That's why Ron said that, when he made that statement about integration being so hard, he said, because once it happened, white teachers never wanted him. He just felt like they either ignored him or they didn't want to teach him. And the level, he ended up getting his master's degree despite all of that. But he said it was horrible because in school, he just felt all of a sudden, either invisible or almost, not, seen as a problem, even though he was a very, quiet, good kid, but he knew he was being treated differently.
And that was that now is especially devastating, because our educational system, especially in the lower income areas, the children, I mean, they're so far behind that unless they are just an exception, it's almost impossible for them to really catch up. I mean, and to succeed. You always have exceptions, to the norm or to the general group.
You have to fight for it though. It's really, and then it's luck and all these other things that have to line up.
It is, but it starts with your parents valuing education, and a lot of them that don't have that. So then you get your inspiration from a teacher. Normally people who say their parents weren't educated, but the teacher inspired them. And the inspiration now, it just seems to be lacking. I really feel for this next generation because they don't have a lot of the support, that previous generations had from the community, and from school and church.
Yeah,
So-
I have my Overground Railroad was published for adults first, but I have a young adult version that just came out in 2022. I guess, did it come out this year?
This year.
Yeah, I think so, in January. God, it's been a long year already. But yeah, it came out earlier this year, and it's for ages 12 and up. And I dedicate that book to my mom, because in the acknowledgments I write, how when I was a kid, she fought for me. And I was in a school that she taught me how to read and write before I went to kindergarten. We spent so much time
Right.
together. And I know it's because of her that I'm an author. I know, she pulled me out of a school of a woman, who was kind of had it out for me. This teacher, she made her cry. And my mother was a small, soft-spoken woman, never raised her voice, but she made this teacher cry because she said, I know what you're doing. They were holding me back. I was only in the B-level reading class, and because no Black kids were in the A-level reading class. And my mother called her out on it, and she started crying, and they pulled me out of that school. I was in 3rd grade. And then I tested, we moved to Ohio. This was in Texas, moved to Ohio and tested 2 grades ahead.
Mhm.
And had she kept me in that school system, who knows, there would have been other issues. So,
Right.
it worked
I
out.
believe that when you challenge a student, when you challenge a child, they're going to rise to that challenge. But if you don't think any better of them, that they're not going to be anything, that's what they're going to live up to.
Yeah.
Not going to be better. You could have been in that trap to where, okay, well, they're not forcing me to read better. I mean, I know how to read, but why do it? I'll just sit back here, and then eventually your intelligence level would have leveled out to that area. So it's great that your mother fought for you. I do have a different point of view with today's youth, because from what I'm seeing, I do see that a lot of our younger folks, our Generation Xers and or not Xers, I'm an X, but our Yers and our millennials.
Next to.
Yes, they're wanting to be better, and they have really grasped onto Black excellence, and they're wanting to raise the bar. And so I do think that when they start to have children, they're going to expect the best out of them as well. So I think that curve is going to go up. I don't think it's going to go down, or at least stay down. So
I think it depends on the community. There's so
Yes,
many
it
different
does.
cities that have different kinds of charter schools or whatever, but I think it's really, the point is, it shouldn't be this way. The point is, we're
Right.
supposed to be, there should be equal attention and support and resources available to every school, regardless of what neighborhood it's in. And that's supposed to be the promise of this country, and we're just not living up to it as a society.
And I do agree with that. We're not living up to it. Oh my goodness, it is 8:29.
We have 1 minute left. So we need to make sure everyone knows how to get Overground Railroad.
Well, you can find it anywhere in any store. Of course, it's available online. Again, like I said, I have a young adult version and the adult version. So for those, parents who have kids that they brought to George Floyd protests or something, this is going to give them context and understanding about why we're in the place that we're in this country. And I encourage parents and kids to read it together. Yeah, and I'm just so honored to have been here, and thank you so much. You can reach me at Tailor Made Culture. Oh, I'm doing a series of posts of my sundown towns and other things on Instagram, and it's
Okay.
at Candacy Taylor, so you can follow me there too.
Well, I did put your website in the chat, so hopefully a lot of our audience was really engaged in this conversation. So I do expect them to be looking for the book and maybe reaching out to you. I want to thank you for what you're doing to preserve our history and to make sure that the next generation sees this, because this isn't necessarily something that everybody's learning in school.
That's all right. Thank you for what you do too. This is really, really great for you to feature and uplift Black authors. So
And please let us know when you're, or let me know, because I'm in the DC area. Please let me know when you're in the DC area and you do that work with the Smithsonian. I would love to.
Oh, yes, it will be. Probably the exhibition's traveling throughout the US through 2025. And there will be a DC venue at the end of the tour. I don't know if we've settled on it yet, but yes, I will let you know.
Please. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much for all of your hard work and research. We it's much needed and appreciated.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Okay.
Good luck with the rest of your events tonight.
Thanks so much. You have a great night and God bless you. And have a safe journey back home too.
Thank you. You too.
Yeah, safe travel.
Bye.
Okay, well, that was a very interesting interview and discussion. And you know, as you all know, I love history. So sometimes, a lot of times when I come across people, their work is surprising just in terms of the depth and the breadth of what people are researching and putting together and pulling different pieces of history together. And it's just amazing work out there. So before we bring on our next guest, who is Roslyn Emerson, she's a children's author and a branding expert. We're going to do our book giveaway. So those of you all who win books, or who, if you haven't won a book, here's your chance. So our first book that we're doing is Sister, Mother, Warrior. Right. And this book is by Vanessa Riley. She had the book Island Queen, and we did our first book club kickback with her when she had that book out. So this book is, I think it's out now. I think it just got released, but if not, it's released this month. So it's a very hefty book. This is the advanced reading copy. And the question to answer in this book is a sweeping novel about which country's revolution? So name the country as your answer, and you can get your copy of this, advanced reading copy of this book. And our second book for tonight is an actual book, not an advanced reading copy. This person was a guest on the show a few months ago. The book is called Lost in the Music. And actually the author was one of the winners of the Black Authors Matter TV Awards for 2022 in the category of young adult fiction and poetry. So T. Wendy Williams is the author. And this book, the question for this book is, which musical instrument does the main character play? So it's Lost in the Music. If you get the answer to that, then you win the book. So we will announce the winner. Do you have a winner already?
Go ahead, Soror. That's the way you do it.
So who won? Which one? Which one?
She said Heidi.
Okay, so who won it?
Gwendolyn Hayes won Heidi.
Oh, Gwendolyn Hayes. I didn't hear the name. Okay, yeah. Gwendolyn Hayes. Okay. I didn't know she was your soror.
Yes.
Okay, and did anybody win the second one yet?
Not yet.
Okay, not yet. Okay, so we're gonna announce the winner of that one after the next interview. So our next, she went away. She was there. I was getting ready to admit her, and then she's not there. So I hope she didn't think we forgot about her. Sometimes it's not right at the exact time, and I tell them that it's about the time. So let me see. Oh, there she is. Maybe she changed devices. Sometimes they do that. So.
Yeah.
Okay, so our next guest is Roslyn Emerson. And Roslyn is a children's author and a branding expert. Her latest book is called The Adventures of Coco, the Miniature Magical Poodle. So, and then she's also going to talk about her work as a branding expert. So I'd like to hear about that too. So Roslyn, welcome to Black Authors Matter TV. Oh, you need to unmute.
We want to hear you.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes,
can you see me?
Loud and clear, loud and clear. So welcome to Black Authors Matter TV.
Awesome, thank you for having me. And you had mentioned that I'll talk about branding, but I also would love to talk about meditation as well, because that's something also that I do as a part of my overall practice
Well, I need
as
some
an author.
meditation, so you're gonna have to talk about that because I know I need some meditation.
Okay, I love it. I love it. So excited to be here with both of you.
And we're excited to have you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, so first tell us about your book, and then we'll delve into these other topics.
All right, awesome. So
Do
as
you
you
have a
indicate,
copy of your book?
yes, I do.
Okay.
Do I have a copy? Absolutely.
Well, normally people do, but every now and then they don't. So,
Oh,
okay.
Yes. Yeah. So
Okay.
this is my book that I had the chance to be blessed to bring to life. It's called Coco, the Miniature Magical Poodle, The Adventures of Coco, the Miniature Magical Poodle. It is about my dog. His name was Coco. He was a poodle. But really, what this book is truly about is allowing children who look like me have an opportunity to see themselves in a book and to experience seeing themselves in the story. And then also, the other component of this book, and what brings joy for me about this book, is the fact that it talks about kindness, loving kindness, and support, and being a genuinely good person, because that's something that we really need in this world right now. And teaching children that skill set at an early age, coupled with reading, is something that is absolutely critical and important in today's society.
beautiful.
Okay. Now is this your first book?
This is my first book, and
Hey,
yeah,
congratulations.
thank you, thank you, thank you.
I know how exciting that is, and so does Rhonda. But I will also say every book is exciting. So I have, in fact, my 14th book is right now
Wow.
getting the proof mailed to me. I thought I was gonna have it for the Boule Rhonda, but it didn't work out. So, but I'm having the proof. So they're all exciting. Every single book I've done has been exciting. So, and all
I
other
love that.
authors I talked to that have done many more than I have,
I don't
they
care
all
how
say the
many
same
books
thing.
you've written, you're always going to be excited on
Yeah.
pub day when you get to
Right.
hold
When you get to hold your book in your hand, it's exciting every single time.
But
I
now,
love that.
what inspired you to, I mean, because you could have tackled these issues that you wanted to talk about in any way. Why did you decide to be a children's author?
I think personally why I decided to be a children's author is I love children. I think children are our future. I think uh, children become the adults that you end up working with and engaging with. And so if there's an opportunity to guide them at an early age, that just means a much more enjoyable experience as an adult. And I think what's interesting about children is that they are at the purest form of life, right? Because they are not persuaded by society yet. They are uh, not afraid of anything. They are curious, they are open. And so it's just something that sparked me to say, here's an opportunity to give back to your community, give back to the world through children. And that's what personally inspired me to be a children's book author. And it's so interesting because I've always said that I wanted to write a book at some point in my life. And this kind of just truly manifested itself, that it turned into me having the opportunity to write a children's book. And I think the young lady earlier was just talking about our community, the world, and what people sometimes speak on you, and
Mhm.
how you have to not receive that and decide how you want to be and what you're going to contribute to the world. Because it's interesting, because I could remember being much younger and not necessarily being really great at writing, or being told I wasn't great at writing, but
Mhm.
later on in life, finding out that actually I was good at it, and that I was able to put a story together, because it's a part of what I do in life and my career as well, is being able to tell stories and having all of that connect back together. So it's encouraging to hear others talk about them writing books. And then it's encouraging also to just see my own personal journey in developing my book.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What some people say that they don't get encouragement, or they get the opposite of that. They get people who discourage them from writing. But there's all different kinds of writing. There's so many different kinds of writing. I mean, you can write a novel, or and even among novels, there's not all the same. There's not the same style of writing. And you can write a nonfiction book, you can write a self-help book, you can do fantasy, you can do children's, you can do a religious faith book. There's so many books, there's so many options for writing, that is not necessarily about the mechanics, but it's about the ideas, the concepts, what you can bring forth in your own life experience. And so you decided to take, now, was your poodle named Coco? I think you said the poodle was named Coco.
Yes, his
Okay.
name was Coco, and actually all of the characters in the book are based on a pet that I had, or a family member had, or a pet that I've come into contact with. Currently, my mom has a dog. He's a schnauzer. His name is Zorro, and he is spicy as ever. And I tried to make sure that I brought his personality into the book, because he is a dog that keeps us laughing. He's super bossy. I call him, he thinks he's the boss. And so it was fun to really bring his spiciness to life in the book. And that was super enriching and enjoying, to really get a chance to bring that to life.
Now, from what you're saying, it sounds like Coco is no longer with you. Is that the case?
Yeah, no, Coco has gone on into the magical world, and he's looking down on each of us and allowing us to spread his love and his light throughout the universe. And and I'm so glad and thankful that my mom has always been a source of inspiration. And like most mothers tell you, you can do anything, right? It takes your mom to tell you you can walk on water almost if you want to. So that has been so great to just have those encouragements throughout the years. And that's really what the book is all about, is just encouraging the love and the connection of friendship through the eyes of a dog and a little girl. So that's definitely something that's super excited about the book.
So have you taken the book into schools, or are you considering it? I should say, I know it's pretty much summertime now. Yeah, it is summertime. It's July.
Yeah, no. So I've been fortunate enough. So shout out to Principal Kurt Brown and teacher Tibria Patterson out in Dawson Elementary, who've been kind enough to collaborate with me and get my book into their elementary school for the fall. So yes, I've done that. I highly encourage others to do that and to tap in people locally. And actually, one of my cousins will be working together soon to put together a workbook to accompany this actual book, because that's something that I also encourage authors to look into, who's developed children books, to say, okay, how do you develop some type of workbook to accompany your actual book? Because that helps to drive some of the success. And then also I've been able to collaborate with Detroit City Books when I'm here in Michigan, to partner with them on their online summer reading program, as well as some of their book fairs. So had an opportunity to really get the book out there and partner with individuals like yourself to communicate what the book is about and getting the word out.
Okay, Detroit Book City, she was on the show. I can't recall her name right now off the top of my head, but she was on the show. It wasn't this year. I think it was early in 2021. Do you remember her name? The owner of the show?
Janice, I think it's Janice off the top of my head. It's with a J. She's gonna get me. I'll have to look on my phone, but something with a J. Miss Janice or Miss Janine. Either way, she is awesome. She has been so supportive, and I wish her continued success. So
she does a fall book. She does a fall book fest thing, because I've been seeing her flyers on Facebook. So she's still at it. So how long did you have Coco?
Oh, we had Coco, my mom and we had Coco a long time. I actually had bought him from a young lady in Ohio because I worked in Ohio at the time. No, was it Ohio? No, I was up at school in Ypsilanti at the time. And she couldn't keep him because her daughter was really rough with him as a puppy. And I was like, absolutely. I mean, this dog is gorgeous. He was an apricot color poodle, miniature poodle. And yeah, I had the opportunity to purchase him and bring him back to Michigan and Detroit. And he brought so much joy, not only to myself, but my family, but to all my friends and the children in the neighborhood. And so it was a really great experience.
That's nice. And it's nice that you have such great memories of your pet. And then not only do you treasure those memories, but you've memorialized them by putting them in the book.
Absolutely, absolutely. And had the opportunity to have other dogs and pets throughout my life. And Zorro is alive and kicking and spicy as ever. So I get to have fun with him and think about other books and ideas that I want to bring to life, featuring Zorro and some of the other characters in the book.
Now, you have a little girl on the cover, I believe. So
yes, I do.
Who is that character? Who is she?
So,
what is she?
no,
Her
thank you for
relationship?
asking.
Oh.
Yeah, thank you for asking. Her name is Lydia Ann. She is a amalgamation combination of all of the amazing Black women in my life. So my mother, my aunts, my grandmother, my very good sister, friends, the women I've worked with, and really just this true essence of Black girl magic and how wonderful we are individuals and how we shine bright whenever we walk in the room, and just really encouraging little girls to be their authentic selves at every point of their journey. And so she is Coco's bestie in the book, and my mom and I are super close. She's my bestie as well. And they just have a really good time. Coco makes her laugh and all of those other wonderful things. I'm going to see if I have another picture of her that I can quickly flip to. Yes. So you can just see like her with her magical curls, with her afro puffs in full bloom, and embracing, right? Embracing every aspect of herself. And so that's what I absolutely also love about this opportunity to incorporate a young Black girl in the book.
Well, I like the fact that you said Black girl magic, because often we equate that when somebody does something amazing, like if let's say they make a lot of money, or they've done something amazing, or whatever it is, they invented something. And so we equate it with these things that are outstanding. But sometimes you can be outstanding just being your authentic self, just being a regular person. And so I'm glad that you continue to use Black girl magic in that respect as well.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you said that, Dr. Lynn, because at the end of the day, to your point, you believe in yourself, and then that resonates and manifests these opportunities. So just by me walking in the room, I'm Black girl magic. You're Black girl magic because you're Black, you're magical, you're beautiful, you're smart, you are amazing. No one's perfect, but you know yourself. And those are things that we have to pour into our youth, Black young girls in particular, so that they know that they are completely magical as their whole and authentic self at the onset. And so that's what that means to me. Absolutely.
Love it, love it, love it. Now, I know you said you wanted to talk about a couple other things.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm just in general though.
And your marketing with your branding. Tell us about that.
So I'm a marketer by trade. And so naturally, when putting together a book, it's so funny, right? Because when you market products to other people, when it's time to do yours, you kind of got to carve out the time and space to really put the plan together, because you know exactly what to do, but it's like, how do you create the time? And so I've always had a passion for marketing, communications. And so it was just a natural fit for me to go into that as a professional with respect to my career. And so one of the other things that I definitely want to talk about as well is meditation. So I recently got into meditation about 4 years or so ago, and I'm currently level one uh, certified through Brown University as an MBSR practitioner of mindfulness meditation. So you say, well, Roz, what is MBSR? MBSR is mindfulness-based stress reduction meditation. And I started it as just a way to help support myself personally, but then also professionally, because as a leader in marketing, my goal and one of my purposes in life that I've tapped into is this ideal of leading mindfully, leading with high EQ, right? And being able to authentically lead and authentically not only lead a team, but lead myself in my own life and how I want to show up and how I want to contribute and give to the world. And so I embarked on meditation a little bit deeper right before pandemic hit, because I currently reside between New York and Michigan recently with pandemic. And meditation had really helped me because I found myself in New York at the height of a pandemic where having those skill sets to really tap into the self and to really soothe the self and to really get connected with the self was so critical and important. And it unlocked for me this excitement, this joy, this understanding that being in connection with the mind is so key. And it's not about perfection, but it's about understanding and being super aware of what moves you, what are you going to allow to move you, and how are you going to navigate when you are moved by certain things that happen from an externality perspective. So yeah, I love it. I love meditation. And I'm actually working on putting together a wellness event with some super dope women in the Detroit area while I'm here in August to kind of test it out. So I'm excited about that opportunity to bring different people together that's tapping into wellness to support our community, because we don't know a lot about these types of things that are available for us, or we kind of have misconceptions around them. And so, yeah, that's definitely something that I'm super passionate about, and potentially see a children's book in my future that's focused on that subject.
Well, that'd be interesting, a wellness book, geared toward children. That's not, I don't know if we see that a lot. We see a lot of self-esteem, but actual wellness practices, I haven't seen a lot of that. So that would be interesting.
Now, meditation a lot of times is coupled with yoga. And
Yes.
do you practice yoga? I think I don't know if that's the word people use for when they do with yoga, but do you combine the two?
Not as much as some folks do, because the type of meditation, so MBSR mindfulness is a type of meditation that really is focused on this ideal of connecting with your thoughts. And there are some connectivities within yoga, as well as some people do sound bath. And again, just
Work
from a
sound bath.
Mhm.
I've
Yeah,
But does that really work?
I think it does. There's some really dope people out there that's doing sound bath. Shout out to Rochelle. She's a fellow Eastern Michigan graduate with me who does and teaches, is a sound bath practitioner. But it's all of it is connected around this ideal of being able to sit with the self, be it meditation, yoga, sound bath, Reiki, any of these types of wellness and mindfulness practices where you are really able to sit with yourself and come to a place of connection, not only to your breath, but to your thoughts. And what's really interesting about that concept is tying it back to teaching children those skill sets at a young age, so that when they get upset or frustrated, or when you're able to have those type of skills at a young age, that's powerful. That not only helps you navigate life, but that helps you to become a better leader. That helps you to become a better, I shouldn't say better, but it helps you to navigate work life, personal life, life in all aspects. And so those are always very interesting skill sets to have. And that's what I get super excited about, being able to share that with the youth at a very young age.
Now tell us also, because we only have 5 minutes left, and we want to,
Yes.
since we indicated on the flyer that you're a branding expert, I wanted to talk about your marketing efforts. Marketing is the area that my the education and expertise is in as well. So marketing has a lot of different aspects to it.
I agree.
Branding is one of the newer terms in marketing, because it used to be more sales, advertising, those were the old school ones with marketing. But branding has become almost as important, if not more important, than the sales part of it, because that branding leads to sales. And so tell us about your expertise in branding.
Absolutely. So you're actually talking to one of the right people that talk about marketing, because I've actually, I don't teach anymore, but was a part-time adjunct professor at Monroe College in upstate New York. And so for me personally, when I think about marketing, you're spot on. Marketing has so many levels to it, right? So you can be in MarCom, so that's marketing and communications. You could be in PR. You could be branding, and branding from a traditional CPG perspective. And so when I say CPG, I'm talking about consumer product goods. And so that has many layers within it. And then there is this ideal of insights, right? So when you think about marketing, a lot of people don't or I shouldn't say a lot of people don't understand. A lot of people get tied on the fact that it's like, oh, I'm just going to do a bunch of commercials. But to be a brand manager or to be in branding, there's an element of understanding financial implications. And that's something that I often talk about to some of the students, is that when you go to school to get an MBA, or when you take a marketing class, oftentimes if you're attached to a brand from a consumer product goods perspective, you're often almost, not always, but most of the time influencing the profitability of the brand. And so as a result of that, you need to understand some aspects of the profit and loss statement. And so when I say profit and loss, it's like, well, what is sort of the 4 Ps, right? So do you understand your pricing? Do you understand the product that you're going to sell? What's the value proposition around the product? How are you going to promote the product? Where's the placement of the product, right? So is this product online? Are you considering doing in-store? Are you going to partner with a brick and mortar e-com? I mean, you just tapped a sweet spot, because I do it all day, but I can sit here and talk about marketing all day, but there's so many aspects to it. And then there's different types of marketing from a channel perspective. So you market products to retail grocers. You can market products to C-store or club stores, or you can market products within the food service channel. So think about when you see a product at a McDonald's, or you see a product at your Hilton hotel in the market, or if you see a product at the airports. I mean, what I love about marketing is that the scope is wide, and that a lot of individuals that look like you and I don't understand that there is a multitude of job opportunities in this world of marketing. And that is just not social media. Social media is a tool in which that you use to drive awareness about your product around the overarching perspective of marketing. But at the end of the day, it's layers to it. And so when I translate what I just said, because I said a lot, because I went to a special place because I love marketing. When you translate it back to your book, understanding who is your audience for your book, what is the insight around your product that drove the reason why you're developing your book, and then when you've identified your target audience, how are you going to plan to communicate to that audience? Because everyone is consuming the media and consuming overall awareness about your product in different ways. And so you can look at it and slice it from, is it male, female? When you look at your overall profile of your target, male, female, age group, demographics from a education perspective, disposable income, what is the suite of things that they like to consume as a consumer, and that has the ability to influence how you decide to actually market to these individuals. And so we could go on around that, but
well, you've definitely
you have said a lot, and the the number one thing that I ask people with any product, any service or product, who is your customer? That most people miss that, and until you know who your customer is, you can't really even get started. You can waste a lot of money.
They'll say who, if you'll ask them who would be interested in your book, and they'll say my book.
Everybody, yeah, no, and that's the
No.
wrong answer. Wrong answer. That means you really haven't thought it through. You're gonna waste a lot of money. That's what you're gonna do,
Right.
and then you're gonna be disappointed because you're selling your book. You know, if you have a book about let's say it's about decorating your house, you don't sell it to somebody who, you know, basically to men who work outside. That's not going to be your core group.
No.
So anyway, you have to know who your customer is. Who's the end user for your product? Who is your best? And you need to know who your best customer is, because your best customer, if you know who that is, that means you will spend the least amount of money for customer acquisition. I mean, you have to spend money to get a customer, but if you know who your best customer is, you'll spend the least amount of money on customer acquisition. Anyway,
I agree with you.
A whole nother.
I know. We'll have to do
everything.
Let's come back and do another session on like marketing your book 101, because I would also throw in one other layer when it comes to marketing, that there is this ideal of B2B and then truly B2B to C. And so basically you're going to have to market to the end user, the consumer, but then there's also a whole stage of marketing that happens to the person who's actually going to buy your book and bring your book in to resale. And so that's where the real opportunity is. Absolutely.
Right. So we are a little bit over our time, and we have another guest coming on. But Roslyn, thank you for being a guest on the show. People can find her book about Coco, the Magical Poodle, on all the platforms. I'm sure all of the destinations for
Instagram, Facebook, website. Website is www.cocothepoodle.com, and Instagram, you can follow me on Instagram at CocoTheMagicalPoodle.com on Instagram. And it's been a pleasure, ladies. I appreciate you both.
We did put your link in the chat, in the Facebook chat. So I'm quite sure that there are going to be some people reaching out. Congratulations on all that you're doing. And thank you for being a part of the show tonight.
Awesome. Thank you. Be well. Take care.
Okay, you too. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so our next guest is Heidi Lewis, and she's going to be coming on momentarily. But before she comes on, we have to announce the winner of the book, Lost in the Music. And I believe it was Mary, I believe.
Wait,
so,
I actually think it was Kay Larry.
No, Kay said it. I think Kay did it after, unless I'm reading it like backwards. If you scroll up, it was Mary Evans, I think. But you know, just look, I don't know how you can tell. I thought it was Mary when I scrolled up. I think it was Mary, but it could have been Kay. Anyway.
Yeah, I think it was. I tell you what, let's go ahead and take care of our guests.
Yes, I agree. And then we'll go back and revisit that. And we really are excited to have Heidi R. Lewis as a guest on Black Authors Matter TV. Welcome to the show.
I'm so excited. Thank y'all so much for having me. I'm so excited. Can't wait to get Coco the Poodle. But thank y'all so much for having me. I really, 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 really appreciate it.
We thank you for being here tonight. You look gorgeous, by the way.
Thank you, as do you beautiful ladies. Thank you.
And I love the painting behind you. Did you do that?
You took the words out.
I did not. And you know, it was in the pandemic, you know, when everybody was bored and in the house, and I found it on Etsy. I can't find the artist, but they're separated. So I had to like measure it, but I love them.
It's a beautiful backdrop.
Thank you.
So your book is called, is it Audrey's Footsteps? Is that?
Yes.
It's Transnational Kitchen Table Talk. So I know that the idea of table talk is what in the new thing or exciting. I'm not sure what makes it different from like just getting together and talking, but you can you can let us know what is your book about, and also some of the work that you're doing with feminism, and you have a lot of stuff you're doing with Love and hip hop. Just all kinds of stuff you're doing. So just tell us about your book first, and then the other work you're doing.
Yeah, thank you. So what happened was I got a job at a college in Colorado Springs. It's called Colorado College, and I didn't know much about it when I got here. But after I did, I realized that almost all, I want to say over 90%, if not more, have an opportunity to study abroad at least once during their college education, whether or not they have the financial means to do so themselves. So a few years in, I started thinking about how I could contribute to that curriculum because it was overwhelmingly white. Colorado College is a predominantly white, but also wealthy institution. And so when I was thinking about what I could do, I realized that it had to be somewhere where a great majority, or not necessarily a majority, but a great deal of people speak English, because I never had or made the opportunity to study a second language. I went to poor schools in Northeast Ohio. Our Spanish courses were laughable now that I think back on it. So it had to be somewhere like that. And then I started reflecting on the things I had learned in graduate school about all the Black intellectuals who had spent time in Berlin, from W.E.B. Du Bois to Audrey Lord to Angela Davis to Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King.
Berlin is popping.
It really, really is. It really is. And I figured, there was already some history there that I could build on so that I wouldn't have to start from scratch. And a lot of my work is in conversation with all kinds of Black intellectuals, feminists included. And I often try to build on the work that they did, because when it comes to the things I'm interested in, from racism to sexism and so on, there's almost nothing new you could say. So all my work is in conversation with work that came before me. And I'm always trying to honor the people who did the kind of work I do. And so I decided to go to Berlin, visit, contacted some people, made some now what I would call friends, and started teaching this course. In 2014 was the first time I taught the course. And so I would invite all kinds of intellectuals, artists, activists, scholars, nonprofit or professionals to speak with my students about their experiences in Berlin, experiences with racism, homophobia, and all kinds of oppression. And over the years, some of those relationships became friendships. And so I thought that it would be a cool thing for people out there who are interested in activism and resistance and thinking about oppression and thinking about ways to address it, to have an opportunity to listen in on the conversations we would have with my students, but also at the kitchen table, or like you said, just anywhere, right? Just our everyday conversations, because my favorite kind of work is work that is, accessible to everyday people who may not have access to classrooms on college campuses and so on. And so we decided to get together and create the book, but it's unique in that the book wasn't necessarily written the way traditional books are. We recorded conversations that we had and then transcribed those into the words that you see on the page. So really, in summary, that's what the book is. It's a collection of conversations with 7 people in Berlin. And actually some of the people in the book, for instance, some of the women who wrote the foreword, and one of the women who's in chapter 1 actually knew Audrey Lord when she was alive. Audrey Lord is one of the most important Black feminists to ever have walked the earth. And she had spent every summer of her life for the last 8 years of her life in Berlin until she died. And I'm fortunate enough to have built relationships with some of the friends that she had, and several of them came together to write the foreword. And then the rest of it is the conversations that I had with my collaborators and friends there.
Well, I have to say that just based on what you said, I really want to read this book, because, and I'll say it like this, because I'm retired military. Before I visited Berlin, the only thing I knew of Berlin was the military history of it. So even when I went to visit Berlin, as awesome as I thought the city was, it's a true party city, and a lot of people don't realize how much of a party city Berlin really is. But even after I went and visited, and I walked around and soaked in the history, all the places I went to visit, I wanted to see the military history of it. Checkpoint Charlie, which is still standing there. But just listening to you, there was a whole piece of Black history that I could have gotten immersed in. And I'll give you a funny story. When Donald Trump was first elected, the world, I guess, decided to celebrate. And so there's this, and you may have heard of it, there's this really cheap airline in Europe called Ryanair. Ryanair had a whole sale on flights. I was able to buy a ticket to Berlin for like $18. That's
I had no idea.
Yeah. So what happened was when they decided to do this sale to celebrate Donald Trump winning the election, I took advantage of it. I went ahead and I bought a ticket to Berlin.
I had no idea.
To Bordeaux, and a ticket someplace else I went. And I decided not to even find a hotel in Berlin. So I went there early in the morning, spent all day and just stayed there until it was time for me to fly back home. And so, but while I was in Berlin, like I said, I walked around, I did a lot of travel, looking at history. I went to the wall, I went to Checkpoint Charlie, but had I known about the Black history that I could have gotten immersed in while I was there, it would have been an entirely new experience. And I don't think a lot of people realize that type of history lies in Berlin.
I think you're right.
How did you find out about it?
So it's so funny because when I started thinking about doing the course and started thinking, where can I go that, where people speak a good amount of English and that has the kinds of intellectuals that are doing the kind of work that's similar to me that I'm interested in. I thought back to one of the things I thought back on was exactly what you just said, the fact that my father had spent time in Germany. He was in the US military, several of my relatives, so I knew there was something there. And then I remembered Audrey Lord had spent so much time there with people and she never learned, she wasn't fluent in German. And then as I started to dig more and more into it, I realized that W.E.B. Du Bois attended graduate school for 2 years at Humboldt University in Berlin. And that Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had given that sermon on both sides of the Berlin Wall, when that was something that we know that very few people could do. Very few people, people lost their lives trying to cross that wall. And he was invited to speak. There's actually a memorial to him at the church where he spoke. And sometimes when we take a walking tour about Jewish history and culture, we walk by there because there's a Jewish cemetery over there. And you can see his picture and a quote from the sermon and pictures of him there at the church with people. And so to me, it just felt right because of the history that so many people, as you pointed out, don't know. And that I once didn't know also. A lot of people talk about the Nazi regime in Germany, as they should. But one thing people don't talk a lot about, that a friend of mine who's in the book, her name is Josephina Praku, she actually gives my students a walking tour about Germany's colonial past. Because Germany didn't colonize for a long period of time compared to the US, a lot of people don't think about Germany as a colonial nation. But if you go to Namibia today, you can find some people that speak German. That's how powerful and impactful it was. And a lot of people don't know that Hitler modeled a lot of his work on those German colonists. And so for me, it was just really, the title of my course is Hidden Spaces, Hidden Narratives, Intersectionality Studies in Berlin, because that's what it's trying to do. It's trying to give people access to those histories and those stories that we often don't get taught. Even when we are being thoughtful about these histories, sometimes those stories get brushed to the side. So yeah, that's really the story of how it came to be.
Wow.
Now, I've never been to Europe. So of course I haven't been to Germany, but I haven't been to Europe. So, but is there something in Berlin that reflects the Black history? Is there a Black population in Berlin? Is there a Black community that has numbers? Tell us about that aspect of it.
That's such a great question. So yes, it's small. I always say I feel so Black when I'm in Berlin, even though it is one of Germany's more racially diverse cities. It's still Germany. But there has been so much activity around Blackness in Germany for a long time. But I'm glad you asked that, because one of the things that makes Audrey Lord's work in Berlin powerful in Germany as a whole is that when she arrived in Germany in the 80s, the 1980s, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of Black Germans didn't have a name for themselves. You know, in America, we went through, you know, with the hard R, Negro, Afro-American, African-American, you know, we've had a long history of naming ourselves. But when she got there, one thing she realizes was that they didn't. And so it's because of her and several other Black people in Germany, like some of the women in this book, Ika Hugo Marshall, Katja Kinzer, Yasmin Edding, Rhea Cheatham. So many people said, you know what, we need a name for ourselves. We need something to call ourselves so that we are not always in a position of being named by other people. And with Audrey, they developed the term Afro-German. That didn't exist until the 1980s. I'm 40 years old. I was already born by the time they decided to have a name for themselves. But one of the things that's so interesting is that so many of them, to your point earlier about the military, a lot of Black people in Germany have white German mothers and either African-American fathers who were in the military or African.
Started on that one.
Exactly. Or African fathers who came to Germany to go to school because it's free, unlike in the US. And so, but back in the day, but not even back in the day it was probably more pronounced. If that happened to a Black person in a rural community, it may have been the case that the only other Black person they ever saw was their sibling who had the same parents or like one other family. But even a comrade of mine over there, he's younger than me. And when he was growing up in Berlin, there was only one other Black kid who would come visit for the summer. He's younger than me. And so I think that their relationship to Blackness and resistance and activism is really unique compared to ours. And I learned a lot talking to them because of its trajectory. Their movement began in the 1980s. And so, yes, there are several, the Black community there, whether we're talking about Black Germans or Black people who migrated to Germany from various countries on the continent. Mm-hmm. It's very small, but it exists and they're active. One of the spaces that I have classes and we go visit and learn from is called the Each One Teach One Archive. It's a space where people can meet and hold events. Actually, the launch of the book we held there last November, and they have a library just full of Black books. You know, I always say, I mean, we go through some severe, harsh racism in the US, and my kids grew up with several books featuring Black kids. Like that was just, I don't want to say it was easy to do, but it was easy to do. There, that is still rare. You know what I mean? They still use racist language in children's books about Black kids. And so for them to have that space, Each One Teach One, is really significant because there are so few places where you can find literature by Black people, books by Black people. And so I've been connected with those people. ADEFRA, the first organization focused on Black women, was founded by people who are in my book. They're still very active. New iterations of that group have formed in recent years. Chapter 1 is focused on the women who are keeping it running today. The forward is co-written by some people who were instrumental in the co-founding of that organization back in the 80s. The Initiative for Black People in Germany is another organization that started, I believe, in the late 80s, focused on Black people. They get Black people together all across Germany and they just meet in one place, whether it's Frankfurt, Hamburg, they just all try to get together and meet. They have Black History Month, just like we do. My friend who gives that tour on colonialism was instrumental in starting a Black Lives Matter chapter there. So they're out there and they're active. It's just that it's very, very small in a predominantly white country and also city.
That's true. I lived, when I was in Europe, I lived in Belgium. So, so that's why I was able to get those cheap tickets. But what I learned while I was there was that there are countries that celebrate Black History Month, but they celebrate it at different times. So for instance, like in London, Black History Month is in October. Mm-hmm. So, and they have a popping Black History Month celebration. They do things throughout the entire month, from plays to cultural events. I was like, oh man, y'all giving the United States a run for our money.
Yep, but they out there, it's just, you know, it's a smaller group compared to what we used to here.
Yes. Yes, it is very, you are very right. But I just think that was a great opportunity that you had, and I may have missed it earlier, but how long did you actually spend in Berlin?
So ever since, so the first time I went to Berlin ever was in 2013 with my husband, just for like 10 days to meet people, start planning for the course.
Oh man, I was in Europe at that time.
Yep, I was there in November. It was cold and dark. I hate being there in the winter, but the summer will trick you. It's so nice and everybody is outside. But I've been teaching the course every summer since 2014, except for in 2020 and 2021 because of COVID. And I'm usually, the course is 3 weeks long. And so, you know, my kids they've been twice before, but they also went this summer. So it's been a privilege to be able to share that with my family and my children, to be able to connect with people and learn about different experiences and share their experiences and I think that's what the book tries to do. It tries to not necessarily expand people's ideas or anything like that, but just to give people an opportunity to connect with people across differences and across borders, and to learn something about the ways people experience Blackness and femaleness across the globe. Because I mean, I've learned so much about, I mean, like I always tell people, you know, people claim that Phyllis Wheatley is the first Black woman to write, right? And she published in 1776. The first Black woman to publish a book in Germany wrote the foreword to mine and just passed away. She was only late 70s. So, I mean, she published her autobiography in the late 80s. It was translated to English in 92, I believe. I'm not a historian, so my dates are always messed up. But I'm just saying, like, can you imagine, like, the first book that Black Germans ever published, it was an edited collection called, the English translation is Showing Our Colors, Afro-German Women Speak Out. Audrey wrote in it. And it was published in the mid 80s. So that was in the 1980s was the first time a Black German had ever published a book. So for me, it's interesting to talk to them about their experiences and how they understand what being Black is and what it means. And not to say that we all agree or that they all agree, but just to know that we've been articulating and writing about and teaching each other about what that means since the 1700s.
Right.
And for them, that tradition isn't even 50 years old just yet. So yeah, that's what I'm hoping that the book does. It just allows us to connect with each other. People who are interested in, my students always either write blogs or create podcasts about the things we do in the course. www.femgeniuses, FEMGENIUSES.com. All their stuff is published there. That walk-in tour I was talking about, people can see pictures, videos, conversations with them that we've had about what it means to be, you know, a Black person in Germany, a Black woman in Germany, and just basically connecting with each other, even though we may not be able to ever touch each other in person.
Right, right. Have you had a chance to go to the Netherlands, and in Amsterdam, they actually have there's a program there. It's like I want to say it's like a 3 or 4 week program that's all about African or Black history. I'm not even going to just say African American history. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
I don't.
I'm going to try to find that for you
and email me. Yep.
Because I wanted to go there while I was stationed there, and I didn't have the chance to. But if I ever have the opportunity to go back and sit in that course, I'll probably be sitting next to you.
I would love it. I would love it. I would love it. I would love it. Yes.
So the first book published by a Black person, not in Berlin, but in Germany, the whole country.
The whole country.
That is amazing.
And I would always tell them when I would go, I mean, you know, we have conversations about writing, and one of the women in my book takes a position that's very different from Audrey. Audrey's position was we need to write. We need to write and we need to share our stories. And Katja's position is, well, no, we don't. I mean, if you want to, you can, but if not, that's cool too. Live in the moment, enjoy life. But Katja's in the book because that's my people. And I mean, I respect that position. I'm more so lean towards Audrey's though, in that I used to tell them all the time, like, wow, like I'm here with y'all. Y'all are teaching my students. We're sharing knowledge and talking shit, but y'all are the history, like in my face. Like when it all goes down, like y'all are the people that made Germany, that demanded that Germany confront its racism. Because since Germany lost the war, they have a very different relationship to patriotism than we do. I mean, I remember going there early, you know, all those years ago, like, dang, y'all don't have no flags. We have flags all over the place on Old Navy t-shirts and stuff, and the flag and the flag and the flag. And they would always say, well, that's what happens when you lose the war. You don't necessarily get to wave a flag for what? But, you know, but since Germany lost the war and, you know, took down the Nazis, it always gave it, and it still does give itself permission to say, look, racism is a US thing. That's their problem. We don't have racism. We took down the Nazis. We're good. We let the immigrants come in. And when you start to dig a little deeper and you actually talk to Black people there, it's like, I don't think so. And people always use that and say, you know, when we argue that we should take down Confederate monuments in the US, we often point to them because, you know, the swastika is illegal. You can go to jail for that. And while that is true, though, there are still monuments to colonialism in Germany. So they kind of do this trick. Well, the US does it too, right? Like, we're not racist, that's over there. You know, we're not this, that's over there. And so, yeah, I think that, you know, just giving people an opportunity to hear those stories helped me make sense of my own stories, learn about other people, and just, yeah.
We could need to have a whole nother conversation about all of the racist symbols that you're going to find in Europe that they don't think count as racism.
Exactly. But yeah, and I'm so sorry that we didn't get to all my hip hop stuff. I know we're running out of time, but yeah, I do a lot of work on hip hop.
We have some time to talk about your other work, because I want to hear a little bit more about that, because you have a lot of information on it. And so I would hate to not to talk about while you're on.
Well, thank you.
So you're an associate professor, but and you have a doctorate. What is your doctorate in?
My doctorate is in American Studies. I got it from Purdue University. And I also got a certificate in Gender, Women's, and Sexuality Studies. I taught in African American Studies when I was there. So, yep, that's what my PhD did.
Nice.
Okay.
Nice.
Okay. And now tell us about your hip hop culture and discourse classes.
Yes.
All of that you deal with. I confess that I am not up to date on some of the vernacular or whatever. And I saw one episode of Love and Hip Hop and I just didn't get it.
Yeah, you know, it's so funny because when I was little, and would be at my grandparents' house, I would play all through the TV shows and then stop and watch the commercials, and everybody used to be like, she is a weirdo. Like, I've always been obsessed with advertising, media, all kinds of stuff. And, you know, I don't know what life was like before hip hop. I was born in 1981. So by the time I was born and coming of age, it was already a thing. People thought it might not have lasted, but it was a thing. And so for me, I like to, you know, write about and teach about and learn about media and popular culture, because I think it makes the kinds of things that I do accessible. Everything I do isn't accessible to every single person, as y'all were saying before. And I don't intend for it to be. Sometimes I'm writing to my peers with PhDs and we use a particular language that we know, just like dentists, when they talk to one another, they might, you know, use language that we, the average Joe, may not understand, because you're just trying to take a shortcut and get to the point. I mean, I watch a lot of football. If you don't watch football, you're not going to understand everything that we say. So everybody uses specialized language, including us. But I do love the fact that media and popular culture gives me an opportunity to talk to people about racism, sexism, and things of that nature, using text that they understand, that they're familiar with, whether it's hip hop, advertisements, reality TV. And I mean, just so many different texts that people can say, oh, I know that. So when you talk about that, that makes sense to me, as opposed to, here's a big thick book with a bunch of words you may not understand. That's important too, but it's also important to meet people where they are. And it allows me to have a lot of fun. I mean, you teach about and learn about and read about and write about racism all day long. I mean, it's exhausting, you know what I mean? So I do like to enjoy myself, and that gives me an opportunity to do that, you know what I mean? So So yeah, I mean, my first article ever was about Lil Wayne. I've written about Kanye. I've written about, love and hip hop. And I just love to think about how media and popular culture also teach us things about ourselves and each other that allow us to have those kinds of conversations about how those things impact how we then understand and treat each other. Yes. So that's my quick spiel. I'm looking at the clock. I'm like, look, I respect the time.
You are so funny. Oh my goodness. Okay, I have a great friend in Colorado Springs whom you have to meet, and I am going to make sure that you two meet each other.
Send me the info. You have my email now,
Yeah.
and email me anytime. But thank y'all so much for having me. Just real quick, I just wanted to let folks know, at Audrey's Footsteps on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, you can get the book from us. You can get bookmark for free. You can get a sticker. You can get a pen. I like swaggy stuff. So yeah, I mean, check it out. The book is inexpensive on purpose. Yeah, and I hope people check it out. And everybody who reads it says they like blow through it in like a day. So I'm like, well, good. Then you can get it and pass it to somebody else who, and then they can get it.
Let them get their own book.
That's true. Look at me, underselling. Look at see. Buy your own. It's only like $20.
Okay, now before you get off, I believe you're going to be at the National Black Book Festival.
I sure am. I cannot wait. Thank y'all so much for hosting this and the festival and all these important events, bringing us together, helping us connect. I cannot wait. So if y'all are around, I will hunt you down and find you.
We will definitely be around. You won't have to hunt us down. You won't have to hunt us down. But we look forward to it. And thank you so much for being a guest on Black Authors Matter TV.
Thank y'all. Thank y'all so much. I appreciate you.
You have a great night. Oh, she gone.
She left quick. That was fast. So I went off camera because our final guest had some challenges with connecting. So, but he's in the waiting area. Before we bring him on, I wanted to make sure we knew who won the second book.
It was Mary. For some reason, I still don't see it. I just got proof of it, and so I went with that. But I don't know why her comment didn't show up on my timeline. So thank you, Mary. Congratulations.
Yes, congratulations.
You have a whole library courtesy of Black Authors TV.
That's definitely true. So we're going to bring on our final guest, Ellis Coles. And he has a long record of writing books. He's written for multiple publications. Last week, when we gave away his advanced reading copy of his new book, Race and Reckoning, which today is pub date. So congratulations on that. We want to welcome Ellis Coles to Black Authors Matter TV. So all we need to do is have you unmute. We see your face, but we just need you to unmute your mic.
Okay, now we got it.
Okay.
Okay, hello there.
Congratulations on getting that done. And welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here, and glad I got the technological part straightened out finally.
No problem.
So,
yeah, I was telling people last week what we do on the show. HarperCollins sends us advanced reading copies of books, so we give them away on the show, and when we give them away, we do it with a trivia question. So the trivia question for last week for your book, because we did it on last week's show, it was name a publication that Ellis Coles' work has appeared in, and there was a long list they could have selected from, and then someone won your book. I forgot which one of our viewers won last week, but I think it was one of our regular people that wins almost every week. But anyway, the list was long of the publications that your work has been in. And I personally had a copy of and read your breakout book, which was The Rage of a Privileged Class.
Right.
And that came out in 1994. So I read that book myself, and that was
a
like,
little while ago. Yes.
Everything.
Was that the launch of everything?
Mm-hmm.
Not exactly, but it was certainly it became a bestseller. It was a big book for me. I had done a couple of books before that. I had done one, which was a history of the press in America. I had done another one, which was a history of immigration and America, and looking particularly at race in terms of immigration and naturalization policy. So Rage, even though people tend to think it was my first book, it was actually my third book.
Oh, okay. Well, that goes along the lines of what I tell authors who have only done one book and then they think they're going to set the world on fire with the one book. I tell them a lot of times people don't. It's the third book, the fourth book, the fifth book, the 10th book. It could be anyone. It's rarely the first book unless they're already a celebrity.
That's true, but it's a weird business. And if you hit the right subject at the right time and you get the right push, that can happen. But you're right. That's not the normal way that it happens.
Well, that's why it's always important to put your best foot forward, no matter which book it is, your first, your second, third, or whatever, because you never know which one is going to resonate with the public, and that's going to put you on that trajectory toward New York Times best-selling author or what have you. So
absolutely,
keep doing what you're doing.
So I'll try. Appreciate it.
Now, what is your day job now? Like, as far as writing?
What is my day like, you mean?
Your day job, like, or do you have one?
My full-time job is writing. I mean, I have an organization, called Renewing American Democracy, which is a nonprofit that I started in conjunction with a few universities. And we're leading democracy projects around the country, particularly aimed at elevating the conversation on this subject. And we're trying to reach groups that are not normally reached necessarily. So we did an essay contest a while ago with the Boys and Girls Clubs. We are in various colleges here doing events. We have part of that is a democracy dialogue. Our first guest was Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor, and we've done another one since then. So that's my other main occupation these times, and I still write for publication. I mean, I just published a column in USA Today, over the weekend on Sunday, which is to some extent taken from this book. But I consider myself a full-time writer.
Okay, well, that's wonderful.
Wow. So where is your foundation located?
It's in New York City. And if you just look up Renewing American Democracy.org, you'll find it.
Okay,
we're going to put it in the chat.
Renewing American Democracy.org.
It's all one word, and it'll pop up. And you'll see the kinds of things that we are doing there.
Okay, and your writing tends to always tap into history. A
lot of this is historical based, yeah. And this one, I mean, some are much more so than others. I mean, but you're right. I mean, probably about a half of the books that I've done. This is 13th. Probably about a half of them are basically histories of one sort or another. The two books that directly preceded this, one was a history of the American Civil Liberties Union, and the other one was called, the Short Life and Curious Death of Free Speech in America, was a history of the American notion of free speech, how we came to it, what it means, and how it's evolved. And this book, Race and Reckoning, is essentially a history of America, but it's a history of America looking particularly at issues of race. So it's looking at what happened with the first people to arrive from Africa on the ships in the 1600s, how America made the decision to go from indentured servitude to actual enslavement, because initially it wasn't clear that America was going to have a slaveocracy, so it was going to become a slaveocracy. That was something that had to be decided. It looks at the treatment of Native Americans and how they ended up getting excluded. It looks at our immigration laws, beginning with the exclusion of Chinese Americans in 1882 with the Chinese Exclusion Act, It looks, of course, the Civil War and Reconstruction. So it looks at a lot of things, you know, and of course the two world wars and all the way up to Trump, you know, and where we are now and how we got into the state of condition and state of mind where enough people thought someone like Trump needed to be America's leader that he actually found his way into the White House.
So what is the common thread, like, because you start off basically, well, before the actual founding of the nation in 1776,
Right.
you start off, what is the common thread? I know race is, but where do you go with the conversation throughout?
Yeah. The common thread is that it's the fact that we make choices as we make choices as a nation, and that for the United States, the fundamental question has been about race from the beginning, since before the beginning. And part of the reason why race was a fundamental question for the United States was that we decided, and I'm using the word in the sense of all of American leadership, you know, decided, you know, that we were going to be a democracy, which theoretically means that we were going to be a country where votes were considered equal, where people were considered equal. And but then we also decided that we were going to be a slaveocracy. And it's hard to balance those two. You can't really balance those two. And so the only way you can make sense out of that is to come up with a philosophy, a system that makes the group of people who you want to enslave something other than men, something other than people. And so it looks at how we've done that with successive groups of people and how instead of when we've had the opportunity to turn away from that, the biggest choice being at the end of the Civil War, when the Reconstruction era was basically supposed to be the chance for Blacks to be integrated into American society, you know, for these folks who had never been allowed to do much of anything to be made whole in the society. America blinked and decided not to do that, and instead caved into the desires of the former Confederates and allowed them to take us back to essentially what had existed before the Civil War, except with slavery without the title of slavery. So it's about the choices the nation makes, and it's about how we came in the 1950s and 1960s to the conclusion that given what we represented, what we had to change what we were, and in some fundamental sense we did. But it also talks about, you know, how we're still struggling with that, because a large part of why the January 6th events happened, as I explained, is because of this racial anxiety. There is a fear, there is a fear on the parts of many people that they are losing their country, that we are becoming another kind of country that's being taken over by so-called minorities. And as a result of that, there are people who are willing to die, to kill, and to wreak havoc to keep that from coming about. And that's part of a long way of answering the question that I sort of posed at the beginning, which is why this nation decided in the year 2016, after we had become supposedly enlightened and after we had actually had a Black president, to go to a person whose chief calling card was that he was a blatant racist. And part of my argument is that, you know, there's an action and there's a reaction, you know, things, and there's never in this country been a step forward without a step back. And that's and I see a lot of parallels in that sense between the Reconstruction era, where you actually did have a period where Blacks were in Congress, were in the Senate, were in legislative houses, were voting for candidates, achieved high positions in society. And white society got freaked out by that and responded with brutal violence, with the KKK, with ordering the federal troops out of the South and going back to the way things were.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize, unless they really are, you know, history buffs, so to speak, that after Reconstruction, or after the Civil War,
Right.
there were Black people in Congress who were
In Congress and the
elected to
Senate,
Congress and the
right.
Senate,
Mhm.
and they were,
Even a couple.
I think almost all of them were Republican, because at that time the parties had different roles.
Yeah,
Positions.
well, the Republican Party at that time was the Liberation Party. It was the Abolitionist Party. I mean, it's one thing that a lot of people who don't know much history, is that they were considered so sympathetic to Blacks that they were labeled Black Republicans by the press and by many others, because the idea being, and it wasn't considered a compliment for them, but they'd rather stand up for Black Americans than for other whites. So yes, at that time, the Republicans were very much the party that, and it was Lincoln's party, obviously, and it was
Right.
that was pushing for, if not some kind of equality, at least for the end of enslavement. And except for in the South, I mean, the Republican Party could probably tell you more than you want to hear right now, but was sort of a splitting off the Whig Party, and in the North, it became very much the party of equality and of liberation. In the South, it sort of ended up withering away, but the Southern Republicans, to the extent they existed, were certainly not with that program.
Well, yeah, then the South, the Democratic Party was the party that was for Jim Crow, and that was the parties changed roles over time.
Well, that continued to be the case for a very long time.
For a very long time.
Yeah, for a very
That's
long time.
why, and because of that, Black people they lost their rights to vote in the South for all intents and purposes. And that's when some of the representation was lost as well because of that. Because if you can't vote your people in. And so
it was all lost, and what they did effectively was to say, we don't really care if we had a 15th Amendment and Black was supposed to be able to vote. We're just not going to let you. And they came up with all kinds of rules. I mean, with that, that's why I'm saying similar to today. I mean, with voter restriction regulations that were certainly not the exact same policies that we are following today in certain states where they're trying to reduce the vote, but had the same purpose, which was, they want you to recite the whole Constitution. They want you to answer questions that no one could answer. And the examiner would decide whether or not you had passed, and so they just made it very clear. And they would actually intimidate people. I mean, the KKK arose for the first time in the aftermath of the Civil War, in the late 1860s. And it became an object of terror. And it actively intimidated people who were encouraging and killed people who were encouraging Blacks to vote, or who were enabling them to vote, even if they were white, but certainly if they were Black, you could easily get yourself killed at that time.
Yeah, it was very well depicted in the second Roots, the Next Generation, when Tom Harvey, the main character at the time, tried to vote, and they asked him to read the part of the Constitution, and then they asked him what did it mean to interpret it. They just kept tripping him up, and half of the people who were asking him to read it couldn't read. So
no, they couldn't do it either.
To read it, couldn't read themselves.
No, they didn't have to meet those standards. And
the test that they would give Black people who all they wanted to do was vote was crazy. Holding up a jar of marbles and telling them, all right, tell me how many marbles are in this jar. And no matter what they said, it was going to be the wrong answer. Oh, you're going to have to come back another time.
Precisely.
There were just so many different things that they did to keep people from voting, which is why I get so upset with people when they say they don't vote. You don't know what people went before you went through.
And it served such, and they were such, they served their purpose so well that they kept those systems in place for 100 years. I mean, it wasn't until it wasn't basically until 1865. And if you read into 1965 rather, when that changed with the Voting Rights Act, and if you read Lyndon Johnson's speech to Congress at the time when he was pushing to get the Voting Rights Act passed, he went chapter and verse about these same policies that they were using then, 100 years later, to keep Blacks from voting. So it took, it took 100 years of history for that to reverse itself.
And I want to refer to another book. It's by another author who's actually passed away, but just on the topic that we were talking about, Lawrence Otis Graham wrote a book called The Senator and the Socialite, which I read. It's probably 20 years old now. I don't know what year, because I just looked it up to make sure I had the right title. It was about someone who was actually a senator doing right after Reconstruction, and just how that whole system was. It was a very well written book. So on The Race and the Reckoning, you start out with the founding fathers. Actually, you start out before the founding fathers, but
Let's start off with the arrival of the ships,
right,
to Georgetown with the
Jamestown.
Jamestown, rather, with the Africans from Angola, right?
Right. I'm from that area. In fact, I went to Jamestown on a class trip when we were children, because I'm from Newport News, and that was one of our class trips that we went on when I was a kid. We went to Jamestown. So what?
But I thought it was. I was going to say, I thought it was important to start at the beginning, because if the question that you're trying to ask is how do we get to where we are, and then you need to sort of say, okay, so where do we begin? And those decisions that took us to where we are began to be made before the Constitution was written, but they were incorporated into the Constitution because by that point, the slave system was enforced, and they had to sort of decide, how do we maintain this and also have a constitution which supposedly guarantees equality for people.
Right. And when the original documents were done, we were considered 3/5 of a person. And the reason why that was because in the South, there were more Black people than there were white people in some of these areas, and they didn't want the white people didn't want the Black people to count for too many people. It's
even more complicated than that. I mean, the thinking behind it was, we had to do also with how much was going to be paid in taxes, but the thinking behind it was that you did have these populations that had large Black parts populations because they were enslaved.
Right.
And how do you deal with this in terms of representation? But it was never the intention to give Blacks 3/5 of a vote. It was no. It was just really for like a census. It was like for counting purposes. Right. So it was in a way to increase representation,
right,
in Congress of white Southerners, who were directly opposed to Black interests, by counting Blacks as 3/5 of a person. That's how that came about. I mean, that ended at the end of the World War, when Blacks were allowed to become citizens. But it just became worse, because then they still got counted in the census, and their votes counted in terms of congressional representation and in terms of the Electoral College and presidential representation. But their so-called votes were exercised by the white former so-called masters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good to show the progression, and I hope that people gain the insight into how much people had to go through and sacrifice, with a lot of starts and stops, and like you said, you make some advances and then you go some steps back, but it's still movement, and we have to continue progressing. I
think it's important in a time like this, where you have a lot of politicians, particularly in Southern states, who are basically trying to burn books, who are trying to ban books, who are trying to ban any teaching about African-American history, because they're claiming it makes white folks feel bad and crazy stuff like that. I think it's important to make sure that these things are being taught, and to fight back, in a sense, against this attempt to whitewash American history, and to sort of pretend that our history is something that is not.
Well, the truth offends you, then is more of a problem with you than it is the truth, not you.
Sure,
You
but
know.
the reality is a lot of these legislators who want to do that, they may very well not know the truth because they are willfully ignorant.
Well, that's
what actually I was
the
gonna
point.
Sometimes it's not about the truth offending you. And when you have your perception of what the truth is for so long, and if somebody comes along and challenges it, you take issue with it.
Right,
So,
exactly.
yeah, I'm not defending anyone, but if you've gone all your life thinking that this is the truth, and if somebody comes along and says what you've been believing all your life is not the truth, is not real, then you get upset about that. It's like challenging your values.
No, that's precisely right. And that's what they don't want you to do. They don't want you to challenge the values, and they don't want you to question, because if you can sort of deny all of history, you can deny that anything needs to be done to make things right. And so if you just sort of assume, well, everybody's always been equal and Black folks are just poor because they haven't worked hard, then you have no responsibility to deal with the real systemic problems that all these practices going back to enslavement made for the Black community.
So since today is the first day the book has come out.
Yeah, today is publication day.
Today is pub day. So
yeah.
Congratulations on that. So how have you been spending the day on your launch day?
Sort of like this. I mean, talking to people. I had an interview on C-SPAN earlier. Then I had another interview, with a radio station. I did some writing, and now I'm talking to you, and I'll do some interviews in the morning. So
including us on your itinerary.
Oh,
definitely.
Definitely my pleasure. Yes.
We love to talk to authors on Pub Day, because that's exciting. The public release day. That's like the launch is, it's all up from here. So
I got so nervous when I was dialing the lines trying to connect to the wrong link. It's why is it taking me to Facebook? But
but that's the link that we send. Sometimes our guests, and we have to start putting both links in. Sometimes our guests will think that they can give this link to people to watch the show.
Right.
And so we have to put the Facebook in red. This is where you send people if they want to watch the show. And so sometimes you're not the first person that missed the Zoom link. So before, but we were so excited to get you on the show because I said Ellis Coles has another book, and I read his book, The Rage of a Privileged Class. And I think it's still in print, if I'm not mistaken. Is it still in print?
It is, yes, still in print.
And that's an amazing accomplishment to be in print so many years, because not all the books are like that. So what are you working on for the future in our last minute or two? What's your future book project?
I was talking to the publisher about that the other day, and I was telling her that I'm thinking about doing a book about how we fix what's wrong with our democracy. And so we're tossing that idea around. I haven't committed to doing it yet, but that's what I'm thinking about doing.
Okay. Well, and people can get your book basically anywhere books are sold, online or in brick and mortar stores. And for those out there who purchase books in person in stores, please support your independent bookstores, especially your African American independent bookstores.
Well, Gwen, Dr. Rhonda, it's been a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure to talk with you. It's always a great conversation.
And thank you, and continue writing and informing the public. We need more information, not less. We need more and more and more. So keep informing us.
Thank you, and take good care. Have a wonderful rest of your night.
And you do the same. God bless.
Okay. See you.
Okay, so that's our show for this week. And we did want to let you all know that next week, Rhonda and I will both be together in Philadelphia at the Zeta Phi Beta Boule. I'll be selling my books. Rhonda says she's just gonna be roaming around.
I did not say I was gonna be roaming around. Rhonda, as a life member and a director, I'm going to be very busy at Boulay. However, I will have a setup. So I will be collecting business cards, and I will be offering a very fabulous prize for everybody who purchased a book from our wonderful authors who are going to be there. We're going to have 8 authors who are going to be at the table throughout the week, and I am so excited. You just have to go to my Facebook page so you can see who those people are. But
yeah, and Rhonda and I will be there the whole time.
Yes,
all the days. But there also will be other authors there with us. So I'm excited. So next week, we will be showing a rebroadcast of our Black Authors Matter TV award show. So for those of you all who didn't get to see it the first time, next week, you'll get to see it then. And it'll be the first week in forever. We've never not been on. So one of us.
One time we didn't have a show, and I think it was Christmas.
No, we didn't miss Christmas. We had a show.
No, election day. That's what it was.
It was election day. We didn't, because it was a Tuesday, and we didn't have the show. And that was in 2020. So
I'm glad we didn't have a show that night. That was
yeah, that was it. We didn't want people to be distracted and have to make a decision. Right. So anyway, we are out for tonight, and thank you all for tuning in. I'm Gwen Richardson signing off.
And I'm Dr. Rhonda Lawson. Have a wonderful week and a blessed night.
Thank you for tuning in, and join us next Tuesday at 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern for another edition of Black Authors Matter TV.